So we're looking forward to the dialogue today. Given the participants that are here today, we're going to focus our presentations around the work that we've done around facilities and curricula. And we will be mainly focused on opening with a small presentation and then opening the conversation for a Q&A discussion with the members of the community that are gathered here this evening. I'd like to turn it over to Chairperson White.
Thank you. Take this opportunity right now to thank each and every one is here, but most importantly to the parents that participated in this here community session, and for those who are online as well. As Dr. Australia expressed, one of the main goals is to give the parents the opportunity to understand what we are doing, and also to give them the understanding of working together. And this is hopefully one of many that we're looking to improve on as well. So for those who are here, once again, we'd like to say thank you.
And just to give context in terms of the structure of the evening, we're going to start off, like I said earlier, with 10-minute presentations, and then we're going to open it to a community conversation. Our biggest focus is to have a dialogue with the community and use the opportunity to answer questions and get perspective from the community in terms of the elements that we will be presenting. The first presentation this evening is going to be focused around our facility department. I would like to welcome Ms. Fayois to the floor, and I know that she has two members of her team. If you could join her just to introduce yourself, because I know you will be part of the dialogue later on.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. Thank you, Chairman White and board members that are here and community members that are here. My name is Sandra Fayoes. I'm the Deputy Superintendent. Facilities is one of my departments that I oversee. And we are going to be bringing you very brief updates because the point is to just bring you some general updates. And we've been pretty transparent with what we're struggling with. And that's what we will be talking to you about. And then we'll make ourselves available for questions and answers. And I'll let the members of my team that are here introduce themselves prior to sitting.
Good evening, all. My name is Bill Hodell. I'm the Director of Facilities.
Hi, my name is George Sevick. I am the Supervisor of Maintenance.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That way you're not standing here for 10 minutes. Yeah. Is that okay? We'll call you back up. Okay, thank you so much. The topics that we're going to be discussing first is a third-party assessment, which we have done every single year. This year, we're going to be doing it slightly different, so we wanted to explain that to you. The second one, we want to talk about our roofs because our schools have been really suffering. And this year, because of the really bad winter, we've been suffering along with the roofs. And we wanted to talk about our plan to address these concerns. The other one is a major lift that we did in collaboration with the city and our state delegation, which is our HVAC upgrades. And of course, that ties into our indoor air quality. Second to last, we will be talking about some school projects that are already part of our capital improvements and some of our future projects. We also want to be able to educate whoever is here on what happens if you go to a school and you feel a need to advocate for your school. What are the proper channels, and how is it that you can get your cause or your advocacy actually make it to a capital improvement request? And it's a long process, so I really want to make sure that we go over that with you. So with that, the first topic, thank you. It's when we took over the department, we needed to make sure that the standards of cleanliness within our schools and within our facilities were measured against some national standards. And there are companies that do this. These are third-party companies that you hire. And what they do is they do a cleanliness assessment, and they talk to your custodians, they talk to staff, and they also actually take swabs of things. So it's a very in-depth assessment. We've done this for 2 years in a row, maybe 3 years, 3 years in a row. This year we're going in a different direction, and I'll explain why, because we need a different type of assessment. But every year we've demonstrated progress. If, as you could see, the our scores from last year in comparison to this year. What I want you to recognize is that the lower the number, the better the assessment. And every year we rate it at a level 2. Now they explained something to us, which is old dirt, or just the way that you go into an old facility. Sometimes you can't actually improve the look of something even though it has been cleaned. So a lot of what they did say that we had is new dirt. And new dirt is good because new dirt means that it will be addressed versus if you fall under the standards for the other ones, it just means that there has been inattention and neglect. And all our facilities fell within this range, and on average, that's how we scored. We ended up testing for the ATP, which is the swab test where they test germs. We ended up testing better than than the average district. And I actually have those reports and I can share them. We do redact the schools' names because we don't want people comparing, like my school was a 2, your school was a 2.5, you know. But we do have that, and it actually demonstrated that in terms of cleanliness and the disinfecting processes that we've been using, that there has been improvement from year to year, but also that our schools are doing well considering their age. The newer schools obviously test higher because they're just easier to maintain. So the ISS assessment goes back 3 years. We have that and it's available to us. This year, we wanted to do a greater assessment. Not only the assessment of the effectiveness of our staff, but we also wanted to do a financial assessment. And Bill could maybe talk about that later if you guys are more interested in what that will look like. And what we're trying to do with this new assessment is actually see, now that the workforce has improved after COVID, could we actually be getting the same level of service but at a savings? So we plan to bring that to the facilities committee when we have that data. We just engaged with a company in those talks. So we will no longer have the ISSA comparison, but we will have something similar that we could share with you. And these updates are always available the third Wednesday of each month. We have our facilities committee. We provide updates on something like I just mentioned, but also we do all of the school construction updates fourth Wednesday. Thank you so much. Will you advance, please? Thank you. So, roofs. Our facilities are pretty old, and so are their roofs. And this is actually, we're waiting? Okay. This is actually Rowayton. And the reason why we chose Rowayton is because Rowayton has 3 different types of roofs. Rowayton has a new roof, which is the white roof, which you will see in most of our new facilities. This white roof actually deflects the sun, so it actually helps with cooling of the building, and it helps with other things because they're designed different. So Rowayton has a part of it, which is the part that's over, I think, the gym cafeteria, which is the newer addition. It has this roof. That roof is great. It has a gravel roof, and that gravel roof has presented with some issues. A lot of our old roofs are gravel roofs. These gravel roofs are challenging because in order for you to identify the leak, usually leaks travel, you end up having to actually like scoop out the gravel, try to fix it, hope that it gets fixed, and then sometimes you will actually have to go back and do more maintenance. This is the reason why we can't expand a lot of the solar projects that the city intends to do. It's because the roofs actually could not sustain that type of burrowing and that type of maintenance that it would take to bring them up to date. Unfortunately, Rowayton also has a slate roof. So there's 3 different types of roofs in Rowayton. Rowayton is not unique. I chose Rowayton because it's one of the ones that actually is still managing with some old, some new, some older, but we have a lot of our roofs are having these issues. And so then when we were confronted with this winter, because this winter had an enormous amount of snow, and then when there was a lot of melting because of the snow, we ended up actually finding leaks where leaks hadn't been. And so most of our winters have been mild. So the team decided that the best way for us to approach this is actually have a company come in, and they're called Gale. They're going to come in and they're going to do an assessment of all our roofs, prioritize them, tier them, and then create a capital plan where we then can start the same way that we do the paving for each school each year, or the same way that we're nearing our asbestos abatement, where we've been doing it now for like 8 years. We will have to tackle the roofs in the same capacity because it will be an immense expense to be able to repair these roofs. And then, so we'll have to actually have a long-term plan for that. So that's another study that we're engaging in that we will be bringing back either to the facilities committee, or if the facilities committee wants to bring it to the full board, we will bring that. Once they tier those projects, we will make sure to share that tier with everybody. And in the meantime, we have just a lot of band-aids in terms of making sure that the leaks are addressed, and we have a contracted roofer that helps us with the general maintenance until roofs get replaced. Would you advance? So we have an HVAC grant that the city applied alongside the facilities department, and we were able to actually get all the schools, with the exception of 2, and I'll explain why. We were able to actually get the funding, and the city matched a portion of that funding because there was a 60% reimbursement to add central air to many of our locations. There was a replacement over at Brian McMahon, and we were able to actually get a lot of that work done today. And not today, I apologize, this year. Naramac actually has been progressing quite well. Marvin actually ended up having to go out for rebid because when we were approved and we got the estimates for a lot of the HVAC work, by the time the work actually came in, the bids were much higher than what the estimates were. So then we had to do some reconfiguration, and we had to renegotiate along with Alan Lowe's office from the city. So Marvin went out to rebid. They actually brought bids in. Rowayton is nearing the end of its Rowayton is starting, Naramek is nearing the end of it, and it'll go through the summer. Rowayton, we think, will be done this summer, and maybe if not, it'll extend into the next summer. Now, Wolf Pit was not part of the grant. So Wolf Pit and Tracy did not qualify as part of the grant because they needed substantial electrical work in order for us to be able to provide them with the cooling that they needed. We were able to do it for Tracy last year. So Tracy now does have window units. We hope that this summer we test that out because it was completed after the summer season. And Wolf Pit will be offline this year, and we'll have to do some abatement in some of the ceiling tiles and then actually put in window units. If you can advance. And then we have Tracy, like I said, that had been completed. Brookside is completed, and the closeout is in process. And also Silvermine, which we were just talking to board member Cole about Silvermine now being air conditioned. And she mentioned a fun fact that after every school she left, they did an air conditioning project. So she got to miss all of them. So at the end of this year, we'll actually be able to say, or 2 years, that all our schools have air conditioning. So that's a major feat. So we do have some upcoming projects. We have some projects that involve some security enhancements. We're always reluctant to share like what those projects are just for the safety of our students and schools. We have some asbestos abatement projects coming up. At the end of this year, all the middle schools except West Rocks that is going to be in line for a new build will have their lockers replaced. We have some student bathroom upgrades already planned for the summer. We've done many playscapes and playgrounds, but we have some more planned. I think Fox Run just got their playscape. We have fencing requests. South Norwalk School actually just requested a fence around their basketball court because the ball keeps going into the street. So as people tell us these things that they're encountering, the list keeps growing. And then we have some paving that's going on. A big paving project that will come up at some point is going to be the reconfiguring of the Brian McMahon parking lot. That's going to be a big project, and we actually will need to engage in a study to be able to do that the same way that we did the Silver Mine driveway. That's a major capital improvement. And then last but not least, like how do you advocate for certain repairs or improvements at your school? So we do have some SGCs that have done this really well. So I think I point to Naramac as one of the SGCs that's really, really involved in their facilities and the projects that need to happen. And they work with their school principal. The school principal will email with the co-chair and tell us, you know, front part of the building that is the older part is now not matching the new part of the building. What can we do? How do we get on the list? And can somebody give me some estimates? And so then that's exactly what we do. We work with the school principal, with the SGC. We look at what is actually being proposed. They ask for window replacements. We realize that the window replacements at Naramac are not just window replacements. It actually has to remove all of the heating that actually is connected to the window. So for that one, we're transparent and we say, well, that's a major project. That one we will make the request for in the upcoming year. But for the upcoming year, we will request the bathrooms. And essentially, working with your school principal is the best way to do it because then we communicate regularly. SGC members change, so the principal ends up being the holder of that information and the principal ends up being the advocate. And then the capital improvements, we make the capital improvement list in the fall, and then the board approves it usually around December. And then, as you may know, the city doesn't approve it until it's coming up, right? Tonight, okay? And so then tonight, the city will approve it. So it's a long process. So when somebody is really frustrated with something in their facility, it's not such an easy fix in terms of getting the amount of money, like $7 million, that may be required to do a replacement. And with that, Dr. Estrella and Howard, and sorry, Chairman White, I didn't know if you guys wanted to do question answers now or you wanted to wait until all of the presentations. Sure. So if you guys have any specific questions for the facilities department, I'm here, but so is Bill and George. So if you guys needed to ask anything unrelated to this, you're welcome to. If it's something unique to your school, we're happy to help. Do you guys want to come up here?
Well, I actually have two questions. Tracy is the homeschool for my kids. It's currently overrun by mice, which is nasty to me. And I'm wondering what can be done about that.
Unfortunately, this winter, we have had that issue in more than one school. We have taken care of it, and we believe that was suspect from the very cold winter. The issue has gone away in the schools we've had. Tracy in particular, I believe that's taken care of, but if it's not, I know it's currently underway. We have a brand new exterminator in the district. They are aware of it. And the idea is what we do is we kind of blitz it on the weekend. What do I mean by that? We just put a bunch of glue traps around,
Right.
and Monday morning we pick them up. And the numbers dwindle and go down. So
Mhm.
right now, we are not aware of any real infestation at Tracy because it's progressively getting better.
My other question was, do we have a timeline for Westrox and the new build? Because that building is falling down.
So the city decided to delay the project because there's a new bill that is coming out that will actually allow them to recoup greater savings than just the 60% reimbursement. I think the greater savings amounted to something like $6 million in addition to what they were saving. As far as I'm concerned, we were supposed to be submitting the application initially this June. It's only been postponed for a year.
And I think one of the things that, to your Tracy question, I had a conversation with several parents during my little tours that I do, and there were some concerns that were brought up about the building. The mice was one, and I know, like Bill Holdell articulated, it was something that was being addressed. But there were a number of other things that the team, I just want to give kudos to the team because they worked really hard during the breaks to address. There were some concerns around the bathrooms, and the team worked to address those. There was some concern about the basement because I know at the ground level there's a classroom and there was a bathroom there, and that bathroom was updated as well. So when we hear concerns that are kind of what I will call mini projects, we try to address those as we can. And as I go through my listening conversations across the district, in this case, when I met with Tracy, those were things that were of high concern to the parents, and the team worked really expeditiously to address those. I just wanted to mention that because it was something that was brought up before, and we were making
Yeah,
sure.
I've been aware of some of the updates in the
Okay.
building. It was just
Yeah.
still a little bit of a mice issue.
Yeah,
But again, with the winter, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
but thank you. Other questions?
I have a question. Good evening. Coming from a teacher at Tracy, I shout out to all the air conditioners that were put in. I'm a fifth grade teacher, however, and the fifth grade wing was forgotten. So I remember when they were there doing the air conditions last year, and I asked the gentleman that was running it, and he said, "Oh my goodness, that was a wing that was built on years later. We didn't order air conditions for the fourth, fifth grade classrooms, and that we would receive them in September last year. But we are now in May, and it is hot. Like today, it was hot, and we don't have any air conditioning in the fifth grade corridor."
Well, thank you, and we are aware of that. With today being the day before tax day, April 14th, generally speaking, even though we had 80 degrees today, we take into account the cooling season starts on May 15th, depending upon the weather. So we took a big turn today with 80 degrees. That we have not started the air conditioning in the district. We will technically wait for another month or 3 weeks to a month. We are aware of the classrooms you're talking about. We have air conditioners set aside, which we're going to place in there between now and the end of the school year.
Thank you.
Other questions around facilities?
I just wanted to ask about the snow removal at the school properties. Um, I know that some of it is done by Public Works, some of it's done by Parks and Rec, some of it's I believe some of it's supposed to be by NPS staff custodials. So I'm just trying to get a little clarity on that. I know it was a challenging winter. There were a lot of complaints about city sidewalks, people not shoveling in front of their homes, in front of their businesses. But around the school parking lots was very challenging in certain buildings. Even when we had our the citywide SGC meeting at Brian McMahon or Center for Global Studies, a lot of the walkways were not cleared. So basically, we were walking through the center of the parking lot to get to the building.
So generally, the sidewalks directly around the building within a 50-foot range are cleared by NPS employees. The remaining sidewalks from that point out to the street is maintained by Parks and Rec, and the parking lot itself is plowed by DPW. It's a challenge. We'll clear the sidewalk, it'll go in the driveway, DPW will come, it'll push it back in the sidewalk, and we try to work together as best we can. Sometimes something gets by and there's a little snow, but it's a team effort.
Thank you.
And I think one thing is important to note, the team has been, after the efficiency study, we've been having an array of conversations with the city around collaboration. And that was one of the areas that we had a lot of conversations around, and how did we collaborate, ensuring that their portion and our portion are done effectively. We have a lot of conversations during the snow season, especially this year, about cleaning, and we coordinate with them and collaborate with them and making sure that things are cleared out and as best as possible. And sometimes it's difficult, particularly this year, because we had so much snow. We didn't know where to pile the snow in some cases because we had so much of it. But I have to say that both teams work very collaboratively, and that was not the case several years ago. And they are like great partners to us. I think it's important to note that, just because sometimes that's the back work that happens that people don't get to see.
I think the city's also just understaffed.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times like Vanessa would have to like rest the guys because their shift had gone so long. And this year, the challenge was actually being able to keep people on for the duration of the storms. And then for us to that's what led to a lot of the snow days. A lot of the snow days were because we couldn't access the schools. And we would tell them, okay, well then, you know, if plowing the schools is going to make it so that you can't clear side streets, then that doesn't make sense, because then our families can't get to school. And so there's a lot of a staffing issue also because of the funding and how expensive it was this year.
Can I go back to the West Rocks?
Yeah.
So, when I guess I have a keen interest in it because my boys are here at Jefferson and we plan to continue with the marine science program. Like, when would that, if it's delayed a year, like break ground? When would it open? And in the meantime, is the old school open, or
Yes.
kids going somewhere else, or how does that work?
So the model is, I'll tell you the model first, and then we'll go over the timeline. So the model is exactly what we did at Norwalk High and P-Tech, which is we would build on the field the new facility so that it doesn't disrupt school. And it's actually worked pretty well at Norwalk High and P-Tech. Even with the noise, there hasn't really been noise complaint, and the construction stops if there's testing. And then once that facility, the new facility is built, we move the school in, and then we tear down the old facility and then build fields in where the old facility is. So that's the model, and that's why West Rocks could be done without swing space, like without space to move staff and students into. Now, the timeline is that typically an application process is about a year. So if we're looking to put an application in June 2027, then that means that we would probably be breaking ground closer to the spring of 2028. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, or the fall. Okay. So it'll be a while, and then that project is anticipated to go over 2 or 3 years. Your boys may miss the whole thing and actually just watch it from the window, like the Norwalk High P-Tech students that are there now, and because middle school is like this. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so I've been thinking about how to ask this question for a while I'm sitting here, and I'm not sure I'm 100% all the way there. So I'm going to try to find my way through. So it's a little bit of a bigger picture. So a lot of these questions that are being asked about how do we do this, how do we do that, most of it, all of it comes down to how we're going to pay for it as well. In going to all these Board of Education meetings and BET meetings and everything, a lot of times it doesn't feel like there's a lot of hope there. So I don't know how to ask this, but how do we have hope for being able to find our way? I know obviously we're talking about West Rocks being in really, really rough shape and needing to be replaced. My two girls both go to Wolf Pit. That school is in rough shape. What is the path? I mean, you were just saying your boys probably aren't going to see the West Rocks. My girls obviously aren't going to see Wolf Pit, but that school and future generations are certainly going to need it, and future other schools are going to need it as well. How do we get to a path where that will become a possibility in the future? How do we pay for these roofs? How do we do all these things that are not wanted but necessary? What is the communication like with the town? Obviously, I've heard a lot of the communication in these public meetings. What is the communication like behind the scenes? Is there a partnership there? What is the path forward?
So you want me to? So I'll start off by saying that we have to think about where the district was several years ago and where we've transitioned to. I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of success that has happened thus far. If you look at the amount of construction that has been happening across the district, I think is very impressive. I have to accredit former Mayor Reeling for starting that process. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance in this district for many years, so there's a lot of catch up that we have to do. And the city is aware of that. We have an incredible partnership with the city where we're in continuous conversations around facility infrastructure. We've been talking for some time about building a 25-year plan, which we've worked and have tried to draft it. The challenge that the city has is how much can they borrow and also maintain their AAA bonding. So they're trying to be really strategic to look at the tiering and the priority list, particularly of how the state of the buildings, like it was articulated, West Rock is in enormous disrepair, and that's why it is at the top of the list as the next building to move forward in terms of rebuilding. So I think that that's very hopeful. Wolf Pit will eventually get there. Believe it or not, Wolf Pit is in better condition than some of the other buildings. It's not the best infrastructure, but the challenges that we have in some other facilities are greater, like West Rock. So I see a lot of hope, and the fact when you walk around that there's so much development happening. We are very cognizant of the things that need to be done in buildings that we need to maintain until we could get to the point of either building as new or building a new facility. And we have a very collaborative dialogue around the capital budget. Mr. Osmani, Sandra, and myself have sat in numerous conversations around infrastructure, what it's going to take to do the work. We are also always active participants in the decision-making process. And if you look at, it's been a few years now, but we had a facilities review of the entire district, and it well articulates the state of our buildings. And that study is always utilized as a reference point to determine how to most effectively tier. There's a number of things as we've engaged in this conversation that we look at, particularly in some cases, where do we build swing space? So if we need to rebuild, Wolf Pit is one of the places that we would have to think about swing space, because that facility has been looked at and there's nowhere to put a school. So there is ongoing conversations behind the scene about the projects that need to happen. How do we best map out these projects? A lot of times these conversations we can have in the open because it involves negotiation, similar to how we can have conversations about security. But I want you to be reassured that we are actively advocating, and the city has a lot of appetite in making sure that our facilities are up to date and well kept. And I think you could see that in a lot of the work that has been happening throughout the scope of the years that I've been here, and even before I came here. And I think it's been fortified with the additional reimbursement rates that we are getting from the state. So I'm very hopeful of what will continue to happen. And I don't know if the team wants to add.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and the superintendent put it well, is that the city side is not the obstacle. The city side actually would like to go out and put in an application for a new school every 3 years. That's the plan that's always been discussed. And so then after this, we would like to put an application in for another 3 years. And so then we have meetings that are going to come up. We bring it up often in terms of making sure that the conversation doesn't fall by the wayside. A good way for parents to advocate, it's actually to advocate to your common council representative and to the BET, and when things like this come up, that the community supports us bonding that money, because we're competing with other departments, but our schools, we have a force that to be reckoned with, and so then I think that that's a good way for us to just keep the conversation alive. But the city, for sure, has been really supportive of new schools. And I don't think that Mayor Smith is going to be any different than Mayor Rilling in that regard.
And the AAA bonding also is really important. And that's one of the things that they're always concerned about, because it will impact our borrowing power and at what rate we borrow. And that's also a financial factor that we have to take into account as we think about resources. But I am very hopeful. Any other facilities questions?
So when you're working with the city and planning on space, how closely do you work or take into account like the rapidly growing city of Norwalk? Like there's a new apartment building like going up, it seems like in every inch, and this is a brand new, beautiful school. And I already get concerned because there's a bajillion apartments being put up just down the road. So it's like, where are those kids going to come, and how overcrowded, and we're going to be stuffing kids in closets here.
So we have a demographer that allows us to actually anticipate some of the population growth and its impact on school enrollment. The interesting fact has been that those apartments actually don't have a lot of children that attend our schools. Those apartments like the Avalons, those types of apartments tend to be very transitional. So people don't stay in them long term. Usually when people are planning for families, they end up leaving those apartments because the rent tends to be pretty expensive, and it doesn't offer you sometimes the lifestyle that you want. And so people end up buying homes. So even though there's been a tremendous amount of housing, like expensive housing actually, that's gone up in the city, we haven't really felt that that surge of enrollment at the schools because of it.
And I think Jefferson is unique. I think this area has the number of kids attending here is greater than other places. When you look at the district as a whole, we actually have I would consider a little bit of under enrollment across the district, and Jefferson is a little bit unique. That's why we wind up recommending other schools in the area for families if they choose to attend, because of the unique overcrowding issue in this particular school. But that's very unique to Jefferson and not necessarily the pattern across the city.
So do we hit a certain number and then you just start recommending to parents? Like, how does that, just out of curiosity, like how does that work to farm people out to other schools?
Once we reach capacity, we start then recommending different options for members of the community. And they also have the ability to, like CMS is one of the feeder schools that they have access to. And we also create different feeder patterns where we have low enrollment so that the families have those choices as well. So I'm gonna now thank you very much, Facilities
Thank you,
Department.
guys.
Hello, and welcome to this community session overview of the Norwalk Public Schools finances. My name is Lunda Asmani. and I serve as the Chief Financial Officer for Norwalk Public Schools. I'm glad that you're able to tune in and to listen to this brief overview of our finances and our budget process. I also want to highlight that we do have a budget book that we post on the website each year. Before you is the QR code to the book. The book contains 4 main sections. There's an introduction section with a superintendent's budget message and some highlights. There's an organizational section that includes information on how Connecticut Public School funding works and also factors influencing this year's budget. We have a financial section that includes all of our budget assumptions. We also provide line item detail overview with the 5 years worth of history for the general fund, for the grant fund, and for the food services fund, which funds our school meals program. Additionally, we also have an informational section, which includes some recent achievements of our schools and our students. We also include enrollment projections going out 5 years and looking back 3 years. We also have summaries of our staffing changes, 4 years worth of history. We do this history at the position level with the title, also based on location. So if there's a particular department or a particular school that you have an interest in, you could see the 5-year detailed staffing history changes for that. And we also include how those positions are funded, whether they're locally funded positions or grant funded position. So again, this budget book is a very nice tool to access information related to the budget and the budget process. The Norwalk Public Schools budget process is cyclical. We typically begin the process in September and October by looking at how we ended the year before and also starting to build assumptions moving forward. And so we begin by looking at what would it take to continue to run the school system at the current level. And so that's kind of the base pro forma budget. So with that, we start working with our departments to start working on their request for the upcoming year. So this is when, if there are any new initiatives that are being proposed, if there are any mandated changes that we need to take into account, these are all included in those initial requests that departments make. The finance department sits with the superintendent during the months of December and January, and we put together the superintendent's recommended budget. Superintendent's recommended budget is then forwarded to the Board of Education, who also review the budgets, make comments, and make suggestions. And the board then approves the Board of Ed tentative approved budget during the month of January or sometimes as early as December. This tentative approved budget is then forwarded to the city and becomes part of the city budget process. This typically happens during the month of January. Between the months of January and April, while the city is reviewing their budget request, we then sit down with our schools and we work on what we call the student-based budget. This is when we sit down with each individual principal and start looking at their needs for the upcoming year. This is a collaborative process. We include members of the finance team, members of the HR department, members of the specialized learning department, members of our curriculum department, members of our HR department, members of our facilities department. So everybody that is really involved in the day-to-day operations of the school and involved in the day-to-day curriculum and instruction components of the school. So we meet with the school leaders and we develop a budget for that individual school, and we have these meetings with each one of our schools in building together the district-wide budget. During the month of April, the city, through its budget process, identifies what the appropriation level would be for the Board of Education. In years where the city approves a budget for the Board of Education that is less than what the Board of Education approved, then we have to work to reconcile those two numbers. So if we have to make reductions to our request, we again work with our student leaders, our school leaders, and our leadership team to identify where are the areas where we can make adjustment, because at the end of the day, the Board of Education budget must reconcile with what the city approves for the Board of Education on an ongoing basis. A brief overview of our student population. We have a little over 11,300 students. Last year, we had about 2,000 new NPS. We had 2,000 NPS employees, with 80 of them being new. We have 26 students who graduated high school with an associate's degree through our unique program at P-Tech that allows them to do that. 51 languages are spoken by our students at home, and we are really excited about the diversity of our district. Comparing our student population with the state, 62%, 68% of our students are categorized as high need student compared to 31%. High need students are students that meet two of these three categories. They qualify for free and reduced lunch. They are students with specialized needs, or they are students that are multilingual learners. So if a student qualifies for two or more of these three, then they're categorized as high needs. So you compare the high needs population in Norwalk at 68% compared to the statewide average of 55%, you'll see that as a ratio compared to the state, the Norwalk Public Schools does have a higher percentage of high need students compared to the state. Again, digging down into our student demographics, you'll see that 55% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and 45% do not. 22% of our students are multilingual learners, 78% are not, and 19% of our students receive specialized services, and 81% do not. And then you can also see our enrollment by race and ethnicity on this chart. As far as the budget is concerned, I mentioned earlier that it is a cyclical process. Back in December, the Board of Ed approved a tentative budget which requested a 6.5% increase, which is about $15.9 million, bringing the total Board of Education budget request to a little over $263 million. In February, the mayor made the mayor's recommendation on the budget. That recommendation included a 4% increase to the Board of Education budget, which is about $9.8 million for a total FY27 recommendation of a little over $257 million. As you can see, the 4% is less than what the Board of Ed approved back in December by about 2.5% or $6 million less. What the Board of Ed at the time set out to plan for reconciliation to make up for that $6 million, we were looking at reducing $3.3 million from our non-school budgets and about $2.7 million from our school-based budgets. A few weeks after the mayor's recommended budget, the City Council set a preliminary cap that they forwarded to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The preliminary cap that was set by the City Council would allow for the Board of Education to receive 4.9% year-over-year increase, which would be about a $12 million increase, bringing the total Board of Education FY27 budget to $259 million. This is still below what the Board of Education had approved back in December. It is less by about $3.8 million. So the Board of Education still has to reconcile to get to that number. Based on this additional funding that the Board of Education received, the plan moving forward was to not make any reductions to the schools beyond any reductions that we make for enrollment changes, but rather the $3.8 million would be adjusted from non-school budgets. So we are currently in the budget development process, and we're working to reconcile that $3.8 million by making reductions in non-school budgets. So here's a look at how a typical school budget would look like. This is an example of Fox Run. This was the budget that was approved back in 2025. You'll see that column in the shaded blue, and then the 2026 budget is the one right next to it with the gray shade. So our budgets are funded by three major buckets. So the first bucket is what we refer to the school-based budget, which is the local budget. So looking at this budget, you'll see that for Fox Run for 2026, their local budget was a little over $5.3 million. There's also a component of the school budget that is works in support of the school, but is funded through the local budget, but centrally, not part of the school budget. So this includes specialized instruction. There are some expenses related to facilities. There are some expenses related to curriculum. So these are all expenses that work in support of the school, but are not funded directly from the school budget. They are funded through the centralized services, but in support of the schools. So in addition to the school-based budget of 5.3 million in FY26, Fox Run received another $2.4 million of additional resources that are not funded through the school. And then the school also receives a number of grants. And so for FY26, you'll see that the school received about 728,000 in grants. As you can see, the grant budget has been going down over the years. This is primarily due to many of these grants were grants that came during COVID. And so they supported the school. But as COVID went away, that grant funding went away, you'll see that there is a decline in the grants that are available to fund the school. So with all of those combined, you'll see that for the Fox Run budget, their 2026 budget was about $8.5 million for the year. You can also see a snapshot of what the enrollment was for that school across grade levels, starting from kindergarten all through fifth grade. And then you can also see a listing of the staff that it takes to run this school. So this is a nice snapshot to see of how a school budget looks like, the components of the school budget, and what staffing resources are needed to run a school like Fox Run. So all schools have a different makeup, but on average, this is how they look like in terms of the funding sources and how we build a school budget. So looking at all of the different funding sources combined for the fiscal year 26-27, about 86% of the overall district budget is funded by the general fund, which are tax dollars. About 10% of the budget is grant funded, and about 2.7% is the food services fund that funds our school meals program. We have had a number of budget engagements leading up to budget development. We started this process back in September with finance committee meetings and joint public hearings and public hearings. So far, we have had a number of meetings that began in September. These meetings continue all the way through the month of May. So right now, we have gone through the public hearing on March 26th. We are now looking ahead to a budget meeting on April 13th. This has already taken place. Tonight, the 15th of April, we will be presenting a budget to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And then on April 20th, the Board of Estimate and Taxation will finalize and send what their total recommendation is for the overall city budget, which will also include the Board of Education's appropriation for the upcoming year. I do thank you for your time and thank you for listening to the presentation. We are open for questions. Please reach out either directly to the finance department. You may also reach out to your schools and your school leaders. They will get the questions forwarded to us. You may also reach out to our communications department who will funnel the presentations accordingly. Again, I do thank you for your time and I thank you for listening to us. I hope you have a good day and thank you.
Now I'm going to ask Mr. Pennington to join us to have a conversation around curricula. I just wanted to acknowledge that Chairperson White is here, but we also have the entire board because I don't think the camera sees that. And I don't think they're seeing me either. But I'll move over. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that the full board is with us this evening. So thank you for being here with us and for all the work that you do alongside your person, White. And I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, everyone. So one area that I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to talk about is our curriculum updating process. that better? I think so. So one area that I wanted to make sure we could talk about is our curriculum updating process. This is something that our curriculum team has a strategic process for looking at our curriculum and updating it across the organization. Some of the curriculum that I'll talk about that we have updated over the last 5 years wasn't updated since 2002, for example, with physical education. And so we have had this cycle of continuous improvement. We started with many different departments, and then we've made adjustments as we needed to. And so to be able to talk through where we are and what are some of the next steps of the work that we're doing. So I think the first layer is we developed last year a literacy vision, and that literacy vision really grounded a lot of our work and really forced us to update curriculum in certain areas. Now, our cycle looking at around 4 years, we amplified our literacy work. And so if you were to look, 2 areas in ELA. You can click on to the next one. So this year, we updated our pre-K to 5 curriculum. Our resources are still the same, but we did a complete revamp of our curricula. And this is done by our curriculum team in collaboration with our literacy coaches. And we have seen some really positive results of this update throughout this year. Through our visits, we have literacy walks where we're visiting different schools. Some of our next steps, because this has now been updated this year, it would not be necessarily an opportunity. We'll make tweaks next year, but it wouldn't be a complete revamp of curricula. But we're going to continue with our professional learning. We are going to continue on our close reading practices and also our lesson internalization. So our teachers are looking at the lessons. They're having teacher team meetings where they are looking at the unit as a whole, but then also looking at the lessons. And they go through a process called the lesson internalization, where they're looking at the types of questions that they're going to ask from the curricula. And like I said, in alignment with our portrait of a graduate, this work has really set us on a great path forward. And that really stemmed from our K-12 literacy vision that was developed by our district team, principals, assistant principals, coaches, teachers from across the organization. And so this is really a Norwalk Public Schools literacy vision developed by our staff for our staff. If you were to look at grades 6 through 8, we actually have a new curriculum resource this year. And so that has allowed us to update all of that curriculum, and that is StudySync. And grades 9 through 11, we have also brought in a new curriculum resource, and that is Odell. And all of those curriculums have been updated this school year. Like I said, as a team, we'll make some minor tweaks. And if we were to look at our next steps in ELA, I think some in our secondary, couple areas that we really want to focus on are looking at our assessments and continuing to revise some of our assessments. We've decided to add Odell for 12th grade electives. So we had a list of 9 high school electives, and in conversation with our high schools, we've decided to reduce the number and really focus on our high quality instructional materials. And so that is something that we have done in collaboration with the schools. And so next year, our high school students will, seniors will have an option to take these new courses that are aligned with our Odell curriculum. And then we have a wide variety of schools in Norwalk. We have some schools that focus on IB. There are IB schools. We have some schools that are our MSAP schools. And so how are we providing opportunities to align our curriculum with those unique pathways like MSAP or IB. In terms of mathematics, so just like last year, we developed a K through 12 literacy vision. We are in the process, it's still in draft form, of developing a K through 12 math vision. And this math vision is going to continue to guide our work for mathematics instruction. So if you were to look this year, our team focused on updating grades 3 through 7. And so some of the things that we did is we adjusted pacing of the curriculum. We aligned it to our SBAC, which is our state assessment. We brought in a lot of building and thinking classroom routines into our classrooms. And you can go into any classroom and you would see more students standing, talking with one another, with using vertical whiteboards. And yet again, you can see that alignment to our portrait of a graduate. This year, our focus was around effective communication. And this has really helped to focus. We've seen that alignment between the two. So if we were to look at our high school curriculum was last updated in 2021. And our vision is leading us into next year. We are actually going to be piloting new high quality instructional materials in our core high school classrooms. And so that will then lead to selecting a new curriculum in high school, similar to what we did through the process for ELA. We're also going to next year really dive into grades K through 2. And look at 8th grade as well, because we really focused this year. We did a deep dive into our SBAC performance and where are some of the areas that we can really make some adjustments. And that's what was one of the factors that had us as an organization look at grades 3 through 7. Okay, in terms of science, I think science is the area that has been the longest without a revision. However, we're in a new phase. And so the last time our science curriculum was updated was in 2017. And so right now we have 6 of our elementary schools that are in a pilot of a new curriculum resource. In grades K through 3, we are looking at building blocks. And then in grade 4 and 5, we are looking at building blocks and open SciEd. And so those 6 schools have been providing us feedback throughout the process. One of my, I think, most excited components is the hands-on nature of both of these curriculum resources. But we will eventually select if we are going to continue with building blocks in grades 4 and 5 or transition to open SciEd, which is our curriculum resource in middle school. And we made that adjustment last year, and we saw some really positive gains on our NGSS assessment and in conversations with students and conversations with teachers. And then we have open SciEd in our high school as well. But our real focus for our next steps is we are going to be able to roll out our curriculum resource and our new curriculum in elementary school next year. And so that's a decision that we are currently still in the process, because our pilot schools are the ones providing us with that feedback on what's going well and what are some areas that we can adjust. But you can see that we have these continuous process and this cycle of curriculum adjustments and change. When we go into social studies was last updated in 2024 in grades K through 5. And we did a big push to bring in inquiry into our K through 8 classrooms. We are looking to launch a pilot of Inquire Ed, which really does bring in this focus of structured inquiry, high quality instructional materials in grades K through 5 social studies. Grades 6 through 8 were updated in 2024, and then in grades 9 through 12, it was last updated in 2021. However, Our focus for next year in social studies, now that we have, I think, ELA in a pretty strong place, is our humanities team is going to be looking to do a curriculum audit with revisions in the fall, and also really making sure that our literacy vision is living in not just ELA classrooms, but also in our social studies classrooms. And so this idea for interdisciplinary planning between ELA and social studies. So that is what's coming next in our social studies curriculum revision. In world language, next year we're actually starting our task force this year, where we are going through a curriculum audit, and the writing will be adjusted next year. So if in humanities, you can see like our next big focus is in social studies and in world language. One of the areas that we are looking to do is really streamlining the process from middle school to high school so that that is a smooth transition. When we go into health and physical education, this was updated in 2024. And PE, I think I already mentioned the last time it was updated prior to that was in 2002. But the state came out with a new guidelines. And so through that process, we have rewritten our K through 12 health curriculum and our K through 12 PE curriculum. And we did that through the 2024-2025 school year. And we're constantly making little tweaks, but that curriculum is pretty much set except for feedback that we try and get feedback from our teachers on what are some of the things going well or what are some of the things that we need to tweak. If we were to go to visual and performing arts, our art curriculum was updated in 2021, and then our music, band, and strings was updated in 2024. And that was done in collaboration with our teachers. And so our next step is to revisit art, bringing together, do an audit, and then make some adjustments as needed and as we see fit. But it's really just this idea that our curriculum is constantly, we look at it, we have conversations, we look how is it aligned to state standards, and we have done a lot of shifts in our curriculum work over the last 5 years. And I think that it's important to know that we're constantly updating. Our STEM curriculum has guidance for families on the website. Our ELA curriculum, because it was going through the renovation this year, it will be up at the end of the school year as we finalize this school year. And that is an update on curriculum. And if there's any questions, I think that this is a good time for questions.
Thanks. Rob, can you talk a little bit more about the Odell process? How did that come about and why we changed into that transition?
Sure. So one of the reasons that we made a shift is we saw stagnant growth on our state assessments. And so as a team, we came together, we had conversations with our schools. And from that process, we developed a district team to really develop a literacy vision. What do we want to see in our classrooms? What do we want to see our students doing? What do we want to see the discussions that we're having? And to really make that, after the vision came to fruition, we realized we didn't have a high quality instructional material. We had, I'm going to say, the state has some model guidance, and we've used that to develop our curriculum over the years. But to really have a high quality instructional material was something that our high schools and our middle schools, we have that in elementary school, but we didn't necessarily have that in middle and high school. And so we brought together a district team. The district team included principals from all levels, It brought together assistant principals from all levels. It brought together coaches, teachers, improvement teachers, interventionists from the different grade levels, and members from the specialized learning team, members from the multilingual learning team, and brought everyone together. We analyzed our data, we came up with our vision, and then we went through a process where we had teachers that piloted one of two. We started with 4 or 5 different high quality instructional materials, and the team, the teachers who would be piloting, really, we whittled that down to 2. And I think one of the real success stories is that our schools own the process, our teachers own the process, our admin own the process. And so then we whittled it down to 2 curriculums. We piloted those 2 curriculums in different classrooms across the district. So middle school, different schools had different programs that they were using. We collected feedback, and then we went through a process where we selected I'm going to say, the curriculum that was what the committee felt was the highest leverage program. So Odell became the program in our high school. And that was different than what was selected in middle school. And so they feed into each other nicely, but it is a different curriculum. And like I said, this was for year 1 of implementation, and we have seen amazing results through our assessment data. We've seen amazing results through our classroom visits. So we did 3 literacy walks throughout the year, and where we were in October and where we are now is in a completely different place. But it's been a very successful, I'm going to say very successful implementation, and we're excited to see where that work's going to go. Dr. Estrella?
I'm off again. Oh, there we go. I think it's important to also mention that a part of that work also was aligned to a portrait of a graduate, and making sure that the curriculum materials that we were using were really elevating the competencies that we want to see in our scholars. So the literacy vision was in direct correlation to the work that we were doing around the portrait, making sure that they were seamlessly aligned to where we wanted our scholars to go as well.
And now we're going through that same process in mathematics as well.
Okay. Not so much a question, but a thought advocacy here. I love the collaborative learning with the math, for example. My son's in 3rd grade and they're doing the stand up and the whiteboards. And I think it's wonderful for, working through math problems as well as building social skills, which is critical. All the hands-on learning that you're talking about and that they're doing in school. I'm not familiar with a lot of these programs for the older grades. We're not there yet. But I guess want to, like I said, advocate for that continued use of hands-on learning, talking with other kids, using books, writing, and steering is clear from just a digital world. I have concerns about that. I've read studies. I apologize, I can't cite any right now, but that I want real hands-on learning. And, what are your thoughts on that? And how do we kind of make sure that is maintained in our school system?
I think one of the things that we've been carefully monitoring, and Mr. Valencisi is not here, but like the piece on what the use of digital tools in the classroom and how do we limit those practices, particularly because of all the new research that's available. One of the things that we're looking strategically is, particularly in our pre-K to 3rd grade, is really limiting the utilization of digital tools to limit screen time, because we've seen what the research says in terms of the implications of that. I think what you're talking about is making thinking visible, and the work that we've been doing across the district in terms of how kids talk about math, engage with math problems, and like really talk about what's happening in the mathematical problem and making it really visible in those conversations that are happening in the classroom. And that's a process that we've been implementing across the district. So when your children continue to transition to the grades, you will continue to see that practice, because that practice will continue to happen regardless of the tools that we will be integrating or maybe modifying as a result of the visioning work that we will be doing around mathematics. And because that visioning work will be directly aligned, like the literacy vision, to the portrait of a graduate, the same processes that we hold true and important for our literacy vision will also hold true and important for our math vision as well.
I don't have a question, but just a comment, and also just to reference, I am a fifth grade teacher here in the district, and I teach literacy specifically. And I do have to say, over the last 4 or 5 years, the revamp of just even the professional learning community that this district have enforced and have brought here, having the workshops with teacher teams and everything we do to internalize the units. I mean, even in a literacy setting, and being in alignment with the portrait of a graduate, and our focus this year being an effective communicator, it is a lot of hands-on and student-led instruction. They're creating critical thinking questions to ask their peers. They're doing a lot of the back and forth and the bantering, right? Skills are taught, and even in literacy, I know math specifically, they talk about the thinking classroom, the thinking and moving classroom, but in literacy, that happens as well, where we're not on devices, where they're communicating with each other and creating things. So ever since even the revamp and the literacy vision and how the learning walks and the data that we receive as teachers and where we can grow and the support that we get from professional development, it has forced us and helped us and supported us to create these platforms for our scholars to be able to express, to be able to lead classrooms and lead discussion and think critically, because that was the big focus last year. So we didn't forget about it, but we use that critical thinking now to become effective communicators, to be able to get to that trail of being in the portrait of a graduate. So it is really good, and I am thankful and grateful. I, as a teacher, have learned and grown so much just as the support of having to be able to support my students in this way in literacy. It's amazing. It is. So it devices we don't use. Maybe I should, but I don't. But in my classroom, but it's a lot of communication and a lot of critical thinking happening. So thanks to the revamp of the curriculum and what is in place to help and support teachers to be able to relay this to our scholars. Yeah.
That was such a on point statement that you made about how it's affecting you as a teacher. I am a retired teacher, and I had used making thinking visible techniques a while ago. What I'd like to ask, if you could explain a little bit, Mr. Pennington, about how this portrait of a graduate is really underpinning or giving more action to all the other revisions and strategies that we've been using. I just want to say recently I've been in 2 elementary schools, and they have that drawing of a portrait of a graduate where effective communicator, that's what we're working on right now, and previously the critical thinker. But it's there. What I like about that is it's not just for the teachers to know what they're doing. It's that the students know what they're doing. I am a good communicator, or I am a good critical thinker. That's an important part. So if you could elaborate.
I think a couple pieces that Dr. Straya, the team have been really intentional around is, in many places, a portrait of a graduate is just a poster on a wall. It's developed and it lives as a poster, but the portrait of a graduate here is really embedded in all that we do. And we started with critical thinking because critical thinking is really the catalyst to everything else that we're doing. We want our students to be critical thinkers. And how can we connect? So our literacy vision, how are we connecting the resources we select to be grade level appropriate for all students? How are we looking to make sure that the questions we are asking are promoting critical thinking? How are, in this year, our focus, as Ms. Brown spoke about, is this idea of effective communicator. How are we designing instruction that creates effective communication? And communication shouldn't be necessarily a popcorn, there's a place for it, but how are students talking to one another? So an perfect example is the building thinking classroom work in mathematics. Students are in groups. They're talking through the problems together. So that's critical thinking and effective communication. And our next focus is this idea of self-directed learner, and how are we really building our students' capacity and to be self-directed learners, and what are some of how do we get them to reflect on the work that they're doing? So as we're writing curriculum, we're thinking about what are the questions we're gonna share or that we're gonna guide, so that it promotes critical thinking, because questions can either promote critical thinking or take away critical thinking. If I ask a yes/no question, that's not necessarily going to lead us to critical thinking. And so that is developed in our literacy vision. It's developed in our math vision. And it is also something that we are constantly talking about in all professional learning, because that is the North Star that's what we want our students to leave Norwalk Public Schools: critical thinkers, effective communicators, self-directed learners, global citizens. So these are things that we are continually building year over year.
I thought it was a really good question you asked, and making sure, or point you made, making sure that we're using hands-on learning and writing, looking at a whiteboard, talking to each other. And now I'm going to contradict myself completely. How are we going to prepare for the world we are entering now with artificial intelligence leading that way? Obviously, we don't have grade school kids really getting deep in that, but high school kids for sure are probably going to have to learn that skill set, right? I have to learn it in my job. I know my wife has to learn it in her job. Every job board or listing that I look at lists how important artificial intelligence is and how proficient people are with it. How do we prepare for that? Are we already, do we have a plan for that? And then conversely, how do we make sure that kids aren't using it the wrong way?
So, Mr. Valencisi is actually representing us today in a lot of this conversation. We've been in a number of national conversations around this particular topic. One of the things that we really focused on when we were doing the work around the portrait of a graduate was first grounding the conversation around what are those competencies that students need to know, regardless of what artificial intelligence will do, because those are critical aspects of who they will become as people in the workforce, the skills they need to have that will supersede what happens with artificial intelligence. So when you look at the different competencies around the portrait of the graduate, we were very thoughtful about how we selected those to ensure that they will hopefully transcend what happens with artificial intelligence. At the same time, we have a responsibility to build student capacity and how to effectively utilize these tools, but also keeping in mind what is age appropriate and when are we supposed to bring in those opportunities in meaningful and productive ways. So we're looking at policy around safe utilization of different tools. When we think about artificial intelligence, we're also looking at how are we contracting with our vendors so that the safety protocols and metrics that we want to see in some of our infrastructure are in place, and that they can guarantee that there will not be misutilization of data. And when there are data breaches, what are the protocols that they have in place to support that? So at a minimum, in thinking about the systems infrastructure around policy development and creating those safe spaces, those were some of the first things that we thought about as an organization. And also being mindful that we didn't want to be very stringent in how we thought about these processes because we know that this is an evolving field that will, for a while now, will continue to change. One of the important facts that we just learned is that 26% of employers right now will hire somebody with no experience but with AI competency, there's somebody with experience with no AI competency. So that already tells us that we need to ensure that particularly our high school students, are learning the skills to know how to form content that will effectively allow them to utilize AI in meaningful and productive ways. It also means that we have to embed work in developing our teacher capacity and how to most effectively utilize the tool. One, to enhance efficiencies for them in terms of the work that they're doing, but also provide learning opportunities that support students and how to use it in responsible and effective ways. So those are the things that we're like working on and building on right now to ensure that our students are prepared and equipped in utilizing it responsibly, but also preparing not only for what they have to deal with if they go to college or if they go straight into the workforce. Those are really important things that we have been actively thinking about. And then how do we then integrate that strategically into the curricular work that has been developed and continues to be developed.
I think the other piece that I would add, Dr. Estrella, was really the strategy around allowing schools the opportunity to play with
Different
tools to decide what would be best for them and to think about how can this be integrated and utilized. Today, I was at one of our high schools who's starting their accreditation process, and it was very evident to that team because they went to a few classrooms and they actually saw a teacher that was having an assignment where the students were actually utilizing AI in that process. And so they ended up asking a similar question around strategy and idea around AI, but they were able to see our high school students actually using it in a really effective way.
And I think another thing I'll add, like we are part of a number of national organizations like EdSpace, ALO, that's also working with different administrators across the nation on how to create safe and responsible policies around AI utilization, and also how to strategically implement these tools to create meaningful learning experiences for students. So the team is actively learning alongside other members nationwide. And in the conversations we've had, Norwalk actually is an exemplar for many districts. Every time we go into national forums, we are always selected to speak about the work. Actually, in May, we're going to be going to ALO, EdSpace to present on the work we're doing. Tomorrow, I'm going to be presenting virtually with Hanover about the processes that we've incorporated because we've been pretty ahead of the field in the implementation and strategic thinking around the utilization of AI in the learning environment.
Mind if I ask a follow-up on that? So are there any partnerships with any of the AI companies out there, like either ChatGPT, Claude, or that's not Anthropic, or Google in terms of that? And I know this isn't the forum for this, but I'd love to see some of our political leaders, if we could get into a partnership with some of these companies, have some of these companies pitch in to some of the school budgets around the country to close some of the budgets that federally we're not getting any money for anymore.
Yeah, so we have a number of accounts. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. Ralph is kind of the expert, but ChatGPT is one that we utilize in the classroom.
Magic School.
Magic School is one of the main ones. We have Google as another resource. Am I missing any that we're using? I think there's another one, but I don't remember off the top of my head that we have partnership with. Brisk. Thank you as well.
Thank you.
And if I can find a way to get money, trust me, when we're in these forums, I will make sure that we're advocating. A lot of like EdSpace, ALO, we have been grant funded into these opportunities. So they cover the cost for our learning experience, which has been really helpful. And it's allowed the district to really have other experts around the nation to look at our policies and processes and provide input and feedback in how we can improve, but also look at national best practices to enhance what we're doing. But in terms of implementation, we're also part of Digital Promise, which is a national organization also that's really focused on this work. And they call us continuously to showcase our work because of the intentional work that has been happening across our district. Any other questions? So if there's no further questions, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope that this is the beginning of a number of community conversations. I want to thank Chairperson White for leading the effort of creating this forum for dialogue. I don't know if you would like to share some final words, or are we good? Good? Okay, so thank you for your time this evening and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.